Caleb, I want to talk about a brand new law that has been written, been signed by the governor here in the state of Florida, going into place July 1 of 2024, and it has to do with squatters. And a simple explanation of a squatter would be that you've got a rental property, it's vacant, and one day you drive by it and there's people that are living there. Somehow they got into the house and they made themselves at home. That those squatters would not have a hard time calling the power company and getting the power turned on in their name. And if you go knock on their door, they might very well say, hey, I'm not a squatter, I'm here legally. Here's a lease that is signed one way or another. So there's squatters are not supposed to be there. And prior to this new law, if you were the owner of that property, you had to then go out and hire a lawyer, spend a few $1,000s to do an eviction to evict these people out of your rental home where they never should have been there.
That's right,
Would
Tom.
that be a typical scenario, Caleb?
That's a very typical scenario, and it's important for people to recognize on this new squatters law. As you mentioned, we are specifically talking about people who have unlawfully entered your property. We are not talking about current or former tenants.
So the statute specifically excludes current and former tenants. And so if they're a current or former tenant, forget it. This is not going to work for you.
That's right. We're talking about, the big situation I see is adult child who won't leave the home. That's a big one. Person who, like you said, has somehow found access to your property and has dug up a fake lease agreement and has shown it to the sheriff, so now they can't leave, things like that.
So we might be talking usually about strangers to you that are squatting in your property, but the new statute also specifically excludes immediate family members, and it doesn't define for us what an immediate family member is. But Caleb, I want to say this, that we have hundreds of videos on YouTube, and the most commonly watched video is something like, how do I make my adult child move out of my house? How do I make my cousin move out? How to make my brother move out of my house? So getting family members out of your house is a very common need for people here in the state of Florida. This squatters law specifically says if they're an immediate family member, you cannot use this law.
I suspect immediate family is going to be interpreted to be husband, wife, and direct children. We'll see how that plays out in the courts, but there is still a process outside of the squatters law to get immediate family out. That's called unlawful detainer. It's actually the part of, or the chapter that this new squatters law is going to be in as well.
Well, hey, just while we're, so I was initially talking about two separate homes. One is a home that's owned for the landlord, and the landlord also owns a rental property, but sometimes the landlord has tenants living within their home. They may have brought in a brother who said, I'm going to pay $500 a month to live with you in your home.
Right.
And it might also, living in your home might also be your boyfriend or girlfriend. But for example, a boyfriend is not an immediate family member. Let's just say you're a girlfriend and you invited your boyfriend to move in with you. There's no real clear detail about whether he's paying rent or not. Do you think you might use a squatter's law to get your boyfriend out?
That would be a great scenario to use that, as long as you as the girlfriend are 100% the owner of the property and the boyfriend is not. The squatter's law would be a great way to get him out now.
Okay, so let's go back to a situation where there's literally two homes involved. The landlord owns a home that they live in. The landlord also owns a rental home. And one day the landlord goes and finds that there are unauthorized people living in that home. And so this is where the squatter's law might be used.
That's correct.
And so what would it require the homeowner to do to get that unauthorized person out of the home?
Well, number one, it needs to be a residential property, which we've checked already. Number two, they need to actually inform the person that you need to leave. Number three, they must have unlawfully entered. That means that you did not permit them to come in the property. They have somehow, entered without your approval. And then what you're going to have to do is you're going to go to the sheriff. You're going to fill out a verified complaint that lays out certain details, like you are the owner of the home. This person has entered and you've asked them to leave and so forth. That is actually, they have a great form in the statute for people to use for that. and you pay the sheriff $90. The sheriff is going to come out. When he verifies the facts, the sheriff will actually peaceably remove that person from your property. So no longer do you have to go through this unlawful detainer lawsuit that's very similar to an eviction. Now sheriffs can remove people off of essentially what's an affidavit.
Okay. And so the sheriff is really going to stand by and keep the peace. The sheriff might, I guess worst case scenario, manhandle somebody to get him out of your house, but the sheriff is not going to move their stuff out of your house.
No, so it's very similar to an eviction in that if this person has a ton of stuff in the house, you can pay the sheriff to sit there and hold the peace while you do things like change the locks to the property or remove personal belongings and put them, on the edge of the property, that sort of thing.
So if you're going to use this new squatters law and the sheriff is going to be kind enough to forcibly remove these people from your property, you need to be there as the owner of the property with a locksmith and some people that can do some moving to put the stuff out on the curb.
Absolutely. You're always going to want to show up with the locksmith or you may end up in the exact same situation the next day.
Caleb, over the years, I've been a lawyer for over 40 years, and many, many, many times people have called me and said, Tom, somebody's living in my home. They've stopped paying rent. Can I just make them move out? Can I change the locks? Can I turn off the electric? Can I bolt the door? All these things. And I have to tell them, hey, it requires a legal process. You got to go to court and get a court order. And there's, kind of come back like, well, I can't believe I got to court and evict these people. They're not paying rent. I should just be able to make them move out. And surprised to learn that it requires a court order. So this is this new law for squatters. It's quite unusual that it is directing the sheriff to do something without a court order. So this is really quite a big deal, the way I look at it.
This is very new. And we'll see how all these requirements in the statute play out. I'm interested to see what courts interpret. But one interesting exception that we have in here is that the property must not have been open to the public at the time this person entered it. One example I have in my head is perhaps maybe you're having an open house to try to sell your property. And one of the people who've been invited to the open house or who've, walked into the open house manages to not leave and stay in that property. That's a situation where I don't think this new squatters law is really going to apply under the statute, but we'll see how courts interpret that.
Well, again, I know there are professional tenants out there. There's probably professional squatters out there that they know how to game the system and work the rules and to their advantage. And I could just imagine that sounds almost like a movie that, they walk into an open house and sit down and say, you know what, I'm not leaving. What are you going to do about it? So this is a new law. And what I find interesting is it kind of puts a burden on the sheriff. I mean, all the Florida statutes, the new statute, the squatters law requires is that the sheriffs go online and confirm through the property appraiser's website that you really are the owner of the property. But I'm curious to see how the sheriffs, how anxious, willing, or cooperative they're going to be as far as enforcing this new squatters law.
Well, that's interesting because there was a procedure in the unlawful detainer statute similar to this, but not as good as this, where you could fill out an affidavit, and if the sheriff wanted to, he could remove somebody from your property. But that was rarely used for the reason you're alluding to, is that the sheriff has some liability here because how does he verify these facts and things like that? Now we have the verified complaint requirement. The statute's very well fleshed out in comparison to the old affidavit requirement, and I think this is going to be used a lot more.
By the way, it says that if you are the owner of the property and you're going to use this new squatters law and use the sheriff to get this unauthorized person out of your home, you are required to pay the sheriff a reasonable fee. And any idea what that might be?
That would be the writ of possession fee for the county you're in. So for Orange County, that's typically $90, but it does vary by county. So very easy, go to your sheriff's county website. They have all the fees right there on the website for you to look at.
My guest today is attorney Caleb Maggio. Caleb, before the break, we were talking about the brand new squatters law here in Florida, and people might be surprised to know that if you have a rental property and you wake up one day and some unauthorized persons are living there, that you can't just call the sheriff and say kick them out. Prior to now you can with this new squatters law, and it's I'd call it a pretty big deal, a pretty big milestone, and as far as a law here in the state of Florida.
That's right, Tom. Nothing like this has ever really been done in Florida.
Now, one thing it excludes is that first of all, we'll go where we repeat that you cannot and never use the squatter's law to get the sheriff to help you move them out or kick them out if they are a current or former tenant. Flat out, period. Can't use it.
That's right. It's not for landlord-tenant issues.
If they're an immediate family member, if you're trying to get your brother, your child to move out, cannot use it.
That's correct.
So we're really generally just talking about strangers as people that have moved into this place. It also says that you cannot use it if there's pending litigation. So you can't like take somebody to court and try and evict them that way and say, things are not going my way here. So I think I'll just move over here and use the squatter's law. No, you cannot do that either.
That's right, Tom. You can't be suing the person you're trying to use it against.
Now, a lot of people might say, oh, you know what? I own this piece of property. I want to use it, this new squatter's law, to get these people out of here. I guess I need to read the statute. In there, they actually give you a form of what they call a verified complaint. So you're the owner of the property. You're going to have to fill out and sign this verified complaint. And I guess the verified means that you're swearing that you're telling the truth.
That's right.
And so you might say, oh, I don't quite fit this scenario. I'm going to cut the corners here a little bit. I want to make this work. I want to get the sheriffs to kick them out. You, as the owner of the property, could get in trouble if you lie on that verified complaint. So there is some protection there for people that might be lawfully in your property.
That's right, Tom. If a person is removed from your property and it turns out it was not done properly through the statute, they have recourse against you as the property owner for damages. So you want to be careful. The statute lays out what the verified complaint is. You're going to want to follow that to a T. Don't make any misdirections.
So, Caleb, what else can you tell us about the new squatter's law?
Well, I could tell you that, a situation that happened to me that this is going to be great for. I had a landlord whose brother decided he wanted to help, my landlord out and move somebody into the property. He moved somebody into the property, then he told his brother, hey, I moved somebody into the property, here's first month's rent. Well, it turns out my landlord didn't like the tenant, the new tenant very much, and he said, no, I don't want him in there. So we ended up spending thousands of dollars and several months in litigation to get the guy out. That is a great situation where now this is going to come into play. This is going to help owners, and you're going to get it's immediate removal. So, when the sheriff comes out there, it is right away. You give him the complaint. As soon as he can get out there, it's immediate. And another great thing about this statute is it institutes penalties for unlawful entry people who do one of three things. The first classic scenario is someone who gains access to your property, creates a fake lease agreement, and what they used to do is show it to the sheriff and say, I have a lease agreement. And suddenly the sheriff has to say, this is a civil dispute. I am leaving. Now, this new squatter's law makes it a misdemeanor a felony to present a false lease agreement showing you have a leasehold interest or an ownership interest in the property. So that is going to go away very quickly, I would suspect. It is also going to be a first-degree felony to knowingly advertise the lease or sale of property you don't own. Believe it or not, Tom, I had this happen to me when I was a young guy in law school. I was going to law school at FIU in Miami, and it was during COVID, and somebody was advertising a property for lease, and so I contacted him, and he said, oh, the deposit's, $2,000. I can't show you the property, but it's COVID. But just, give me the deposit, and I'll leave the keys in the box for you, and you can come. Well, I figured out very quickly that he wasn't the owner of the property with some online searching. And that's something that's hopefully going to go away now with this new felony penalty.
So all of those are very real scenarios, Caleb. But let's talk about the one that when people are impersonating the owners of the property so that they might go on the internet and get photos of your house and pretend as if it's theirs and try and get unsuspecting people to try and lease it from them and give them the security deposits, and then they find out that the intended tenant never really had an agreement with the owners, and you could use the squatter's law to kick them out. So too bad, so sorry for them.
Yep, that's another great situation. This is
But
gonna
I
come into
guess that,
play
you know,
for.
if you're a tenant out there and you're looking for properties to rent, you need to be aware that sometimes there are con artists out there that are trying to rent properties to you where they don't even own the properties. They just want to get the security deposit from you.
That's right. You always want to go check the property appraiser for who the owner of the property is. And a lot of times these people will give you stuff. Oh, I'm the property owner's brother, or I'm their agent, or I've known them for years. Then demand proof.
Yeah.
Don't take their word for that.
And then the other thing I've even heard of this about, again, we have professional tenants, professional squatters, but they move into somebody's vacant home, and when the owner of the property finds out about it, they call the sheriff. The sheriff goes, knocks on the door, and these professional squatters, they pull out a written lease and say, look, I've got this property rented. I'm a tenant. Here's a valid lease. And the sheriff's got to throw up their hands and say, oh, I guess this is a civil matter. I'm going to make the owner go to court. How do you... That could be overcome with these new squatters law.
Now it is a criminal matter to do that. And so if you provide the evidence, perhaps you're going to have to take some civil action first in the beginning. But once you get that evidence, you can turn it over to the police department. They should investigate it and prosecute it. And I suspect very quickly after a few of those cases are prosecuted, people are going to back off of doing that because word is going to spread.
I noticed in the new statute it says that the sheriff has the ability to arrest anybody in the property that has outstanding warrants for them. So people that are doing this probably have a criminal career and might have some outstanding warrants. But I wonder if they were a professional squatter, and so now you're the homeowner and you're doing this verified complaint, and the sheriff shows up and the squatter's saying, well, here's a written lease. I wonder if the sheriff would arrest that person at that moment in time for presenting that fake lease at that moment in time.
I think it's going to depend on, number one, like you said, if they already have warrants out for them, and number two, what the facts are going to show. There's no answer to that in the statute. I think we're going to have to wait and see how police departments are really going to decide to handle this.
And by the way, in the squatters law, it always talks about the sheriff. So even if you were in the city limits, you would still be calling your county sheriff to get this done.
Every time it's going to be the sheriff.
All right. Hey, folks, my name is Tom Olson. The name of the show is Olson on Law. Thank you so much for all your great calls and questions. We do